minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before I begin my testimony, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter on behalf of Congresswoman Sinema from an Arizona-based blockchain company in support of this committee's investigation into this area.
Without objection.
Thank you. Distributed ledger technology has tremendous promise. The value of a non-falsifiable ledger will have broad applicability to financial and non-financial transactions. It could reduce transaction costs, increase transparency, and provide for instant and final settlement in areas ranging from cash transactions to real property records to securities. It also provides a platform for more speculative transactions such as Bitcoin that are backed by nothing. More than perhaps their scarcity and the belief that there will at some point be a greater fool to take them off their hands at some unknown price in the future. But nonetheless, much of our daily lives will soon involve something like blockchain. And so I think it's past time that governments around the world have a look at these digital tokens and figure out where and how they should be used. And it strikes me there are three fundamental questions that I'd like your reaction to that we have to face. The first is, will there be a mechanism to bust trades or not? In the case of the flash crash, for example, the CFTC had very clear rules in place under which case market gyrations would result in trades being broken. There's no such mechanism, for example, in Bitcoin, where if someone steals your Bitcoin codes, they have it and you cannot get it back. Similar questions arise if a hacker absconds with the contents of your vault. You know, is there a higher authority that you can go to break that trade? So that's the fundamental design question that I think you face and that we face as regulators. Secondly, is there a need for something equivalent to a consolidated audit trail? In the securities space, we have learned by bitter experience of the need, if we're going to detect and prevent market manipulation, we need to have an electronic record of the timing and the beneficial owner behind every transaction. You know, that could be designed into digital entities like this, or it could not be. And thirdly, related is the authentication of participants. You know, will there be a mechanism, if necessary, with a court order or with an order of the regulator to unveil the identity of counterparties and issuers? That's something that could be present or could not be in any of these. And so I was wondering if you have, a reaction to how you think we should address those three issues: busting trade, a consolidated audit trail, and authentication of participants. I'm just happy to go down the line here.
Sure, I'm happy to start with it. With busting a trade, there's technological challenges to that, right? These trades, once they occur, or a transaction, once it occurs, has occurred. There's no opportunity for a settlement 24 hours later or something else where you can look at it and pull it back. So that is a challenge.
Yeah, but there are technological means of doing that where every transaction would be conditional on the fact that some trusted set of entities haven't publicized a code that invalidates the trade.
Yeah,
there are technological ways of doing that, but everyone has to understand that it's not like cash. You know, if you steal cash, it's yours, all right? And with the exception of serial numbers and so on, you pretty much own that cash. But it can be designed differently. And all right, anyway,
no, it absolutely could be. It absolutely could be.
So the consolidated audit trail.
Yeah, unless those two items I put together, the authentication of participants and the consolidated audit trail, I'll let you know that certainly if you're trading on our platform, we have information on you. We have your bank account typically. We have a lot of know your customer information. So we know the individuals, we know where they are, we verified their identity, we know the source of funds. We know quite a lot about them. And there is an immutable record that once it's created. So in many ways we have, while it's not a consolidated audit trail in exactly the terms you're looking at, we have much of that information gathered on our platform in a form that we are able to reconstitute it if it becomes necessary.
Okay. All right. Dr. Brummer, do you want to take a swing at those?
Get your microphone, please.
Other than saying that I'm sympathetic with your objectives, I'd have to defer to Mr. Limpress as to how the internal operations on the
Okay. Mr. Rosenblum?
Sir, I think to take all of your questions, we have to step back and look at a couple things. there are a number of different currencies, and there are a number of different items being traded here, and there are a number of different places in which they get traded. So if you're talking about Bitcoin or other things that we'll view as pure currencies, right, which is probably where this question starts from, I think there are one set of answers to those questions. I promise to get to those. The second thing, though, is when we're talking about the new tokens and things that are being developed for particular platforms, those are very different, right? And there's at least two places that those can be traded. One is on the platform itself. Second is on exchanges, most likely exchanges registered with the SEC. When we talk about exchanges registered with the SEC, I think your notion of having all three of those things exist will absolutely happen, right? I think the question of if we move, and I think with well-regulated, well-thought-out platforms, right, that type of, at least to a large extent, all three things that you're talking about, identifying customers, having a consolidated audit trail or some kind of trail, and being able to bust trades can happen on those platforms. I think when we move to something like Bitcoin, right, there I think you have a much more difficult problem with this because that genie is already way out of the bottle, right? And that trading, the ability to trade Bitcoin throughout the world, it's very difficult to put in at least a know your customer rule or an identification rule. For example, you have a wonderful consolidated audit trail. You can follow Bitcoin throughout the trail, right? You just don't know who it was who held it, right? So that one, I think, is the one that that's going to be much more challenging for this subcommittee.
Gentleman's time has expired.